Right, Anne. We're phoning Anne now. Okay? This is something a wee bit different. You're going to enjoy this. Or you might not. It depends. Let's speak to the lovely Anne and see what she's saying. I'll just try and get this on the show.
Hello, David.
Anne, good evening.
Hello.
How are you, madam?
Very well, thank you. Yeah,
Good.
very well.
Good. Anne, we are broadcasting right now live across the United Kingdom on DLive. Now, Anne, is it Anne with an E or without an E?
It is indeed Anne with an E.
It's
and
Anne.
yes, thank you very much for inviting me onto the programme. It is really appreciated.
My pleasure. Now, Anne with an E, what would you like me to introduce you as? What is your reason for being here tonight? The website you want to talk about?
Yes, I think the creator of the WhiteSpaceOnline project is the key thing here, which I started about 9 months ago now. And it's fantastic that it's getting increased in support from a really wide range of people. Okay.
Is this a far right racist website then, Anne? You know, my goodness. This is the BBC you're on to.
It's not. No.
Okay.
And it just does illustrate the problem, because that is exactly what people's reaction is when they just see the word white. And it is so interesting, isn't it? Because it could be a website for black mothers, or it could be a Jewish organisation, or it could be Asian or Muslim, and no one will bat an eyelid. Someone comes along with a white website and people get really concerned, and it just illustrates, I think, the way that whites are vilified within the country. And that's really partly what the website is about. It's trying to explain, it's a resource for people to use to explain what is happening. It isn't good, it's not fair on white people, and it's actually harming all races as a consequence, but the website does concentrate on white people. And we really, as a society, we need to think again about, you know, how we see white people and how we treat white people.
What's the URL of the website, please?
So it's WhiteSpaceOnline.org.
WhiteSpaceOnline.org. Right.
That's right.
Tell us a bit about your background then. What's your background?
Well, my background is very, very average, normal person. I was brought up a socialist. I was brought up not to see race, which is interesting, to treat everyone the same, which I still do. I don't judge people on their race or colour. I judge them as an individual. And went to university, worked for 40 years, because I am retired now, and a lot of that time it was as a business consultant working with SMEs and government. Mm-hmm. And maybe 5 years ago I started noticing that things didn't sit quite easy with me. Things stopped making sense. People didn't behave the way I expected them to, given how I'd been brought up to treat people equally. And so I started looking and listening, and I got onto Twitter, which is, you know, for all that its problems, it is a great resource for finding out and making your own mind up about what's going on. And I think that is the really important thing. If people can be open-minded and not jump to a conclusion, but just listen, you know, take time to listen to people, discuss with them, and then come to a conclusion. Which, you know, I really, really urge people to go to the website and take a look through it and see what they think.
I think in relation to Twitter, I think it used to be a good resource for that, because once upon a time, Twitter was probably the best, in terms of free speech out of all the platforms. But then about a year and a half ago, it really has just gone downhill. And obviously we've seen President Trump banned from there.
Absolutely. We've lost so many people from it. And I have, as a consequence of that, I have set up a Telegram channel and a chat channel linked to Telegram, which is detailed on the website, because I think, yes, Twitter's time limited for a lot of us. So I think a lot of people are looking for other alternative
But then,
avenues.
as we point out as well, the issue with Telegram is that you access Telegram through the App Store and Google Play, and it only takes Apple or Google to decide they don't want to allow you on, and they'll just remove you off that as well. So it's
absolutely
websites are the way forward. Now, when we see things like WhiteSpace, as you point out, if it was any other ethnic group or religious group, nobody would say a word. But the sort of initial reaction, and even myself, it's sort of, all right, what's this? White culture? You know, because we're kind of brought up to not discuss this or to look into it. Why do you think that is?
I don't know what the high-level reason is. I can speculate, but I'm not sure that's helpful. But for some reason, let's just call them the powers that be, want to create friction between races. And one way to do that is to portray whites as privileged and non-whites as the underdogs and oppressed. And so all the things like white privilege is exactly doing that. It's saying white people have things they haven't earned and they don't deserve at the expense of non-whites. That is the clear message. Now, is it wrong? Whites don't have privilege, but it's pushed so hard and so continuously. People from both groups pick it up. White people start to believe it, non-whites start to believe it. And then, of course, you get antagonism between them. You get white people who are no longer proud of their race, and all races should be proud, all people should be proud of their own race. And it starts to, well, create great friction within the country, but also, and I think this is part of it, and I think it's important to say it, the other thing that it does is it prevents white people from standing up and saying, actually, just like every other ethnicity, we have a right to remain the majority in our own country. You know, that is enshrined in the terms of anti-Semitism for Jews in Israel. They have the right to self-determination for Israel. Now, white people, as in, I mean, we say white because we're attacked as white people, but let's say the French should have a right to remain a majority in their own country, as should Icelanders, as should Norwegians, as should British, as should Irish. They just all happen to be white ethnicities. But by making us ashamed of who we are, making us guilt-ridden about the past, whoever it is that's doing this is trying to stop us from demanding what everybody else already has.
And would you not agree, though, that for the majority of people in this country, that they don't look at things through a racial prism, whereas people from ethnic minority backgrounds will? Because, look, let's be realistic. People from ethnic minority backgrounds have faced challenges, and perhaps not as much now, but back in the day, there was challenges if you came from an ethnic minority background. Therefore, you did have to club together. You did have to join together. You did have to have solidarity. And, you talk about the issue of Israel and the argument for a lot of Jewish people would be is that they have faced discrimination, they have faced pogroms and attacks, and they have been left with no option but to advocate for the well-being of their people. Now, this isn't necessarily something that white people have faced yet. Therefore, this is quite alien to most white people.
Well, yeah, I would say what you're saying now is actually an argument for white people identifying as white and grouping together as white, because we're not often given these statistics, but when you look at them, you find it is white people that are frequently marginalised. the least likely to go to university of all groups. And that's not just poor white people, that is all white people. White people now, young white people, earn less than the average non-white person. It was called a pay gap when it was the other way around. Now it's just saying, oh, it doesn't happen anymore. No, it's a pay gap the other way. I was looking at, for the website, I was looking at prisons and the justice system, which, you know, is said to be institutionally racist against non-whites. If you look at the suicide rate in British prisons, nearly 3 times as many people pro rata that are white commit suicide than black people. So this is the sort of situation, and also in many, many, many communities now, whites are the minority. In many, many schools, white children will be the minority. And one figure that's quite startling is in just 7 years, white British babies will be less than 50% of all babies born in this country. So even right now, maybe not historically, yes, we were in the majority, but now we are headed for minority, and some people already are minority. And that is combined with the fact that there is a concerted campaign against us, is all I can say. Just as I was waiting for your call, I got an email came in. Let me just get it up. From the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust. There's a seminar I'm sitting in on tomorrow. The title is Whiteness, a Problem for Our Time. That is the NHS, who's currently struggling to deal with COVID, has the time and resource to repeat. This is a repeat of a previous 2-hour seminar talking about the problem of whiteness. And we all know whiteness is white people. You cannot have a white person without whiteness. So, yeah, I would say what's happened, or has maybe happened to non-whites in the past, is happening to white people now. And we have no other countries. This is our homeland. There is no route out for us.
But as again, and I want to talk about that in a bit more detail. And as I said, I'm not arguing this to be awkward. I'm just arguing it as what you will face. But the argument is that when white people have collectivized, have gone to perhaps more nationalist movements, as in the case with National Socialism in the 1930s, or extremist organisations, it turns into supremacy. And it's not just about fighting for equal rights, it's about fighting for dominance and supremacy. Therefore, what people perhaps on the left would argue is that you have to fight back against white collectivisation because it leads to supremacy.
Yes, I understand that is something that is raised often. What I would say is that if we're saying white people, that is the Irish and the British and the French, cannot remain majorities in their own country because of Hitler, then we're basically ignoring the sacrifice of millions and millions of white people who died fighting Germany in the war. Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting that we, as a society, we can now see the bad side of white, but we never ever recognise the good side. So, for example, with the slavery, slavery was not a white invention. It happened long before white people started to enslave. All races kept slaves. All races were enslaved. White people were the lead in ending it. But from what you would see in the press, the white people are the only people guilty of slavery. And this is the thing, it is wrong. We've been taught all our lives, haven't we? Don't categorise people, a whole race, based on the behaviour of some. Yep. And yet that is exactly what's happening with the whole Hitler narrative. No, all nationalism is a desire to, well, it's the opposite to globalism. And really now people have to choose one or the other. So nationalism is simply believing in a country, believing that the country should have borders and control migration, and that by doing that you remain a majority in the country you've built. The ethnicity who built that country remains the majority, and therefore decides on the laws, on the culture, and the values.
But I live in what would be called an ethno-state, Scotland, which is 97% white. And I don't identify with those that run this country and the establishment of this country. It is totally the opposite. I mean, I would probably feel more accepted in in somewhere in, I don't know, a more socially conservative place in Africa. So how does that work then, is in terms of values? Because the different races don't always have different values, and again, this is the kind of issue, no, not an issue, I mean, my argument against ethno-nationalism is that when you look at it in practice, it's not what people think. You look at Scandinavian countries which were ethno-nationalist, but they've moved away from that. I mean, the argument back against that as well, they're not purely that. So it's like as well with the Hong Kong issue. You know, a lot of people supported people from Hong Kong coming to the UK because of the values that they shared. So how would you argue back against that?
Well, I would say, is there a African country that we would argue on that basis? Is there an Asian country? I know Tanzania is currently removing non-nationals from the country because they want Tanzanians to have the job. Now, are we arguing that they shouldn't do that because sometimes Africa is bad, or countries in Africa are badly managed?
No.
I would hope not. I would hope not. And that is, if you believe in nationalism, you simply believe that not only just white nations, but all nations have a right to self-determination. And yes, at times that will mean your government is not good, is rubbish. But then that's down to you as a white people, or in Africa as black people, to then get them out of power through democracy, etc., etc. But I don't believe we can say, because we don't like our government, then that means white people are wrong and we need people of other races to take care of us. And I would apply exactly the same to countries in Africa or Asia. They also have the right, should have the right, to run their own countries without interference from us. You know, it works both ways.
But then here's the other thing as well, Anne. And again, I'm just arguing this to keep the conversation going. Maybe we're just getting our comeuppance for the British Empire. You know, where basically we did go to these countries. Yes, we brought a lot of good things, but we also did quite a lot of bad things as well. So maybe we're just the unlucky ones, and we're dealing with the sins of our fathers.
Yes, the thing is, it is happening to just about every white country, including Ireland. And from what I remember about my history,
they didn't have an empire. That's a fair point.
Wasn't involved in colonialism or the empire. In fact, they might have suffered. And the other thing I would say is, although, yes, Britain did have a big empire, did the average British person benefit from that? No, they didn't. It was the leaders, the people that ruled, that benefited from it. So we're not due any comeuppance. It's not something that we should expect. It's not a karma because we never benefited from it in the first place. And also, I will just make another comment about that does worry me. If this is seen as some sort of comeuppance punishment, I would just ask people, and I know you're sort of asking these questions for discussion, which I really appreciate. I would ask people to think, well, when will that punishment end? Because, you know, we're saying, okay, the British did bad things during colonialism. So when we're a minority, is it evened out then, or not? You know, can that same argument be then used to say, well, we really should give up our houses for the people because et cetera, So I think we should really, really argue against these sorts of justifications for us, for what is happening to us. Yeah.
On the other thing is as well, though, is it not an obstacle? You know, as I say, when you start talking about whiteness, the issue is, look, most people will turn on the TV and think, oh my, there's quite a lot of people from ethnic backgrounds here, and they see that. You see them commenting on Twitter quite a lot. People maybe realise that you're being made to feel guilty for whiteness. So I think a lot of people now get that. I think a lot of people in this country get that. But then to make the kind of move to white well-being, white nationalism, etc., is that not a step too far for people to take? Is it not too much for them?
I probably wouldn't call. I probably wouldn't call it white nationalism, because that implies we only want it for white people.
Okay.
I think it's more nationalism.
Okay, fine.
So that's one thing I would say.
Okay.
Is it a step too far? It may be, but there are repercussions for that, and people need to think seriously. Are they prepared to stand up? And I think the key thing is, this is not about hating any other race at all. And in many ways, non-whites in this country are being harmed just in a different way from this whole push that there is. They're being made to feel like they're victims, that they don't have power, etc. That's not healthy for anybody either. So it's to all our benefits that we are able to, well, I would say discuss things. If people can, and what I find on Twitter is, I have discussions with people on the liberal left. Within 2 tweets, they've either blocked me or they're raining swear words at me. They can no longer discuss anything, and so long as they're in that mode, we can't move forward with them. But if we can have an intelligent dialogue, then we can find a good way forward, for everybody. That's, talk, which is, there's so fantastic programs like yours. And, I really do appreciate you having me on this program, because it's something that loads and loads and loads of channels will just ignore and pretend it's not even out there. And that's not healthy. So again, I appreciate very much you inviting me.
My pleasure. I mean, I do. As I say, my take on things just now is, the more that social media companies censor, the more social media companies try and destroy people's point of view and perspective, the worse things are actually going to become for everybody. And I actually argue the issue just now with so many different things is that this country, this system, is not actually working for anybody. And I talk about that quite a lot, and sometimes people get a bit annoyed about me as I say that it's not so. Even people from black communities feel the system isn't working for them. When they're out rioting, the system only works to preserve the status of a 1%, an elite globalist.
Absolutely.
And that is the issue that we face. So, Anne, what are you looking to achieve with this website, and what are you looking to do? Because as I say, I go on there. Now, to me, I don't see anything wrong with it. It's fine. It's talking about issues that are real. Obviously, you're going to face real attacks, however, from people who disagree with you. What are you looking to try and achieve here?
Yes. So first of all, it is simply a space for white people, and saying, every other race is rightly allowed to associate in a group of their own people, and whites should have that same. So it's kind of standing up for white people in that way. And you can see how we're not allowed to do that, because if you see a group of white people, somebody suddenly shouts, "Where's the diversity?" It's never said to another group. So one thing is to be a space for white people. The next is to be a resource for all white positive people, and that includes non-whites. I have a fair number of non-white people that follow me, and vice versa. who support us, because just as you say, they see that this is not good for anybody. So it's a resource with information about the prison service. There's going to be demographics coming up, anti-white hate in schools, which is quite shocking if you watch some of the teaching methods in American and British schools. And so people can dip into it, get information to present to their friends, their neighbours, their family, to help them understand what's going on. And the third thing is we are a campaigning project. So at the moment, people that are part of the project are writing to London Metropolitan University, because one of their professors put out a tweet saying, well, now you understand why I'm so wary of talking to white people.
I know.
She's a professor teaching young, vulnerable by nature of the fact that they're young students, white students. And I feel for those white students. So we're currently in contact with the university, and we're pursuing that. And what we want to achieve is that the university looks at whether it is an anti-white organisation and starts to remedy that if they find it is. And to be honest, given that I did actually contact them about 4 months earlier with the FOI, because this same professor had, when Kemi Bakendosh, the Equality Minister, came out and said teaching white privilege as fact is illegal, this professor proudly sent out a tweet saying, in that case, it's my job to break the law. And I put an FOI to them saying, are you investigating?
Kemi Badenoch did actually speak very, very, very well on that.
She did.
She actually really... She really spoke very well, and I think it is also quite damning that a white person wouldn't have been able to have said what Kemi Badenoch said and got away with it. You know, that's the situation that we're in, and I think people do, as you point out, a lot of people of different races actually realise that, and I think a lot of people are in the position where, look, yes, not many people voted for Britain to become a multicultural country, but it is what it is. Many people have friends from different ethnic minorities, and we don't want to see it collapse as a society, but the mainstream media and organisations are deliberately winding things up and making things worse. And look, they might think they're doing this just to white people, but actually they're going to make it worse for everybody. And that's who I really have an issue with here, Anne.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It is our governments that have, for example, invited, and I would use that word, about quarter to a third of a million people into this country, and that's net every year ever since Blair.
Yeah.
And they're continuing to do it. It's not fooling.
No, the thing is, this is the point I always make as well, is I think if we're going to give an anti-immigration message, we could try and do it from a bit more positive, in that, is it right that we're bringing people from all corners of the world? Look, being brutal about it, most of them are just becoming Deliveroo drivers now, and yes, some go on to success, but, and again, a lot of these people are coming, they're living in poverty. They look at places like Govan Hill. It's not working. The system is not working for anybody.
No, and to be honest, even if they're people like doctors and nurses, I find it quite strange that the liberal left celebrate this.
Taken from their country.
We've stolen.
Yeah, that's right.
We've stolen them for our own benefit.
That's right.
Hang on.
That's
How
right.
does that work? But yes, I agree. It is the government, and as I said, I don't dislike any race at all.
Yeah.
I think it's great that we have this true diversity of races. It is the government continuously, one after the other, and each time, since Blair, we've voted for a government who has promised to reduce migration, and each time they have failed to keep their promise.
Yeah.
So, it is definitely the government that is responsible and to blame. Absolutely.
I mean, I personally don't see this ending well. I really don't. I see what's going on in America. I don't see it ending well. I think the media are really nefarious force in all of this. And I think what was interesting speaking to you tonight, Anne, was you do put this across quite well. And whether you like it, whether I like it, whether our audience like it or not, this is a very sensitive topic. And, you know, I say this to people, we might not be happy about it, but it is one we have to tread carefully on. Whether we like it or not, it is what it is.
Yes, it is. And we need to discuss it, because that is going to be the safest route forward, that we can talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, so that everybody understands and can make informed decisions.
Mm-hmm. And again, your point's right. I mean, if there was a black space online, nobody would have any issues with it, and it would be celebrated. But you do what you do, and it's the end of the world. I just don't get that. That's not equality.
No, it's not. And it's interesting. I had a discussion when I was following up a particular aspect of my project. I was speaking to someone in a government organisation about white people being sidelined in this particular issue. And we were talking about the Equalities Act and protected characteristics. And I said to her, yes, does that cover white people? And she said, you'll have to check. Now, what does that say? The answer should be, well, of course it covers white people. How could we have protection that didn't cover white people? But this is the whole way the media and, yes, those in power keep conveying. And Ben Bradley is very good on this.
Yeah, Ben Bradley is good. Ben Bradley is good. He speaks out against it. He does well.
That's it. For the underprivileged white boys and girls, he does. And he said, you know, people don't seem to understand that the Equality Act actually protects white.
And I'm interested in your take on this as well. I again, where I'm not on board necessarily with other political movements, is that you cannot deny, and you coming from a socialist background, that there is a class background to all of this. The rape gang scandal, when white girls, predominantly white girls, there were a lot of Sikh girls and Hindu girls as well, being sexually raped by men of predominantly Muslim, Pakistani, Bangladeshi heritage. It was because they came from poor backgrounds. If this was white, middle to upper class girls, it would have been all over the media. Well, it wouldn't have been allowed to have happened. But there was a big class element in that as well. And
yes.
So I think, as I said, you can't really deny there is racial elements, but there is a class side of things as well, in my opinion.
Yes. Well, yes, certainly the working class, and that is seen to be, and I think it is white people, yes, they are terribly marginalised. And I think to date, I mean, I would say I'm sort of middle class, to be honest. I live in a little village in the countryside, and in many ways I'm protected, or I have not yet seen the fallout from all this. But working class people have, you know, they've seen their entire towns where they live change completely. They've seen their culture being rubbished. Yes, there is a class element in it.
But also, I'll argue this is where I'm interested in your point. We actually talk a lot about black on black crime in London, the stabbings, the shootings. Now, again, the media don't talk about that, perhaps because of the underlying issues, but there is a fear to talk about that as well, because these people are working class as well. And, you know, the devastation of gang culture, we've had people on before to talk about it, and it's terrible. The amount of young black men that lose their lives so young. And again, you're just to pretend it doesn't exist. You're just to pretend it doesn't happen.
Absolutely. And the problem there is that I have written two articles recently, one on the criminal justice system, one on literally on black crime. I went through articles going back 25 years to see what they said about it. And again, we can say that black people have been badly done by some of their community leaders who put their own politics, staying in power before the needs of their community.
Yeah.
And it's very, very sad. And yes, people die as a consequence.
Yeah, they do. They do. They're not, because they're not actually prepared to talk around issues like fatherlessness, like lack of good role models, like issues around how your life is, because of fear. People are losing their lives in this country because of fear of being called a racist. That's
Yes.
And fear of the multi. I call it the altar of multiculturalism. Well, I'm not the first to call it that, but lives are sacrificed on the altar of multiculturalism.
Absolutely. Yes, people's lives, literally.
Do you think, people will become more and more aware of racial issues moving forward, and of I know that's not the right term, racial issues, but the media pushes racial issues down our throats every single day. I mean, I'm not going to deny as well there isn't differences in races. Of course there is, as there is with nationalities, but the media is shoving it down our throats every single day, and it only goes one way. So do you think more and more people are gonna start maybe waking up to what's going on?
Yes, but what worries me is, yes, it's endemic. The critical race theory, anti-white, is endemic.
It is.
But what is particularly worrying is, despite the Equality Minister statement, it is still taught by people like the BBC, in certain schools, by the National Trust, by all our regional institutions. And so poor young, not poor as in unwealthy, but young people are being brainwashed. Young white people are being brainwashed to believe that they are second-class citizens and need to be vassals to black people. And you see it when you talk to some young people on Twitter. And I try to be empathetic because I know the sort of education they may well have had. And so it may be that we become more aware of race, but in a very unhealthy way, where whites become more and more reluctant to be anything than ashamed of their race, and feel they have privilege, which is just a crazy word. So yes, and that's what worrying. And again, that's really what the website is about: helping people, adults, to help their children to understand that you have no reason to be ashamed to be white. Be proud of your race like every other race is. And interestingly, the website was first called Our Children Matter, because it was really the concern about our children that started me setting up one, but things broadened out, so I changed its name.
Well, Anne, I think it is a very interesting topic, and it's been very interesting talking to you. I think it was one of your colleagues got in touch. So listen, if you want to download this off DLive afterwards and share it anywhere, you're more than welcome to. I've put a link into your website. Is that the best place for people to follow you?
Yes, that would be super. Yes, so I'll download it and put a page on my website for people to be able to hear it again, and link to UNM, which is doing brilliant work. So thank you. That's super. And as I say, thank you ever so much for inviting me.
My pleasure. And as I said, more and more with UNN, and sometimes my audience don't like this, but we've had on people who are pretty strong Muslims and others as well. I actually just want to be in a position we can have a grown-up adult conversation about sensitive issues, because see, if we don't, it's going to get bad. And
that's fantastic. Yeah, we have to be grown up.
That's the thing. That is what it fundamentally is. The elites, the media, they treat you like you're an idiot and you're not allowed to quit. But as I said, history teaches you how this ends. Do they not learn from history?
No, you're right. We're sadly in precarious times.
It is. Listen, Anne, thank you very much for coming on, and you enjoy the rest of your evening, all right?
Thank you, David. You too. Take care.
Bye-bye now. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. That was a really... hope you enjoyed the chat there with Anne. Thought that was a great conversation. Very interesting. Something a bit different. I told you it was going to be a wee bit different tonight as well. And as I said, you reach the stage where you just think, well, what's the point in doing anything if you can't actually have a proper conversation about issues that are real?